The National Domestic Violence Hotline's advocates seek to help the 10 million men and women subject to abuse in the United States every single year. The hotline offers emotional support, legal help, relocation services, shelters, and pet and child support. Founded in 1994, the hotline is headquartered in Austin, Texas, and is funded by federal grants and private support. Mary Susan Gallien Clinton served on the National Domestic Violence Hotline Board for 9 years. In talking with Mary Susan, I asked how she became so passionate about this cause.
Sometimes the philanthropy finds you, and as I would wait in the car line at school to pick up my two sons, I noticed in the car line there was this mother. She was always very fidgety. She had a big Suburban. I knew she had lived in a really nice home, and she had these 3 adorable kids, but she was just really hyper. And I just kind of watched her from afar. And then gradually I noticed that she was becoming even more fidgety. And so I got out of the car and started befriending her and talking to her about her sons. Her sons were the ages of one of my sons, and just got to know her. And it was more of a casual relationship in the car line. And then one Friday afternoon, about 6 months later, I received a phone call. And it was a phone call that she had to leave her house that afternoon, and she needed a safe place to stay. And her husband had been physically and mentally assaulting her, and she needed to have a safe place for she and her children to stay. When she called me, she said, "We really do not know each other that well, but I feel like I know you well enough, and I feel like that you have the compassion to understand what my situation is." And she said, "I don't really want to confide in my closest of friends because I do not know where this is going to go from here, and I do not know the direction of help of where I can go and receive services." And at that time, the Naples Children Education Foundation had already been founded, and we had a lot of initiatives for children at risk. She was very concerned about where her children, what would happen to them when she left the home, and so that just started a true interest. And so I invited her to come and live with us for a while, and in and out. And we helped her with the children's advocacy programs and everything to help her and her children become, sound and safe. And I just really got a great interest in the domestic violence because I really didn't know anything about it. When I first moved to Naples, and this was about 28 years ago, my first incident was I was giving some furniture away, and I gave some furniture away to a nonprofit that was a shelter for children who had been abused and needed to be taken away from their families and were not put in the foster care system. And the young boy came with the driver, and he was 16 years old, and his face was just black and blue. And I asked the driver, I said, "What happened to him? Was he in a car accident?" And then he told me, and he explained more about that nonprofit. So that really planted the seed right there. And then I realized it crossed all socioeconomic lines. Whether you lived in a mega mansion, if you lived in a trailer park, that domestic violence is one of the leading killers, along with breast cancer, of women in the United States of America. And so that just really, I wanted to get more involved, and I did in the community. And then I received a phone call from the National Domestic Violence Hotline Board, someone I knew that served on that board and knew of the work that I was doing in Southwest Florida, and asked me to join that board, and I did.
She describes her role as giving advocates the resources to do their jobs well, whether that be creating self-care programming for them or fundraising for the hotline to be more sustainable.
The big thing with the hotline is being able to answer every call, and we're not able to answer every call. Thousands and thousands of calls go unanswered every year because there's just not enough resources. So being on the board for all those years at the hotline and now at the shelter, the main goal of a board director is to raise the money so that you can accomplish your goal, whether it be the shelter being sustainable and being state of the art, and or the hotline raising the funds, because every call at the hotline costs the hotline around $21.50. So every time they answer the phone. And so people, it takes 5 phone calls for someone to call the hotline and talk to advocates before they'll actually make a change and leave that abusive relationship.
Other than working directly with violence victims, Mary Susan has been able to contribute by lobbying on Capitol Hill for grant funding, and she met with NFL leadership to create a partnership. She has seen this funding give new lives to others.
The one in Naples is a prototype in the United States. It's built like a maze. It has security guards, guarded gates, and if someone tried to storm past the guards, they could not get in because it's a maze to go back to the apartments. And so a lot of families will not leave an abusive situation because a lot of wives will not, because if you have a teenage son and if you have a younger daughter, they will not let the different sexes stay in the same component, the apartment. And a lot of shelters do not let pets come in. And a lot of women will not leave because the pet has been the comforter to the children during all witness in-office abuse. So the Naples shelter, you have an apartment, all of your family can live there, and your pet. We have facilities for the pets, and you were given your own bedrooms, and it's just really a nice apartment. And then you're given job skill sets to learn, and then you have the opportunity to transition to a house in Naples. And we have a thrift store called Options, and a lot of estates give their furniture there, a lot of clothes there. I know during COVID, when people were cleaning out their closets and getting rid of excess and realizing we didn't need as much as we thought we did there. And so the children and the parent can go to that store and pick out any furniture they want to start their life all over again. When they first come to the shelter, they go in and get either clothes, toys, whatever they want, just to give them the assurance of, like, we're going to make your life a lot better moving forward. A lady called in from Ohio, and she said, I need to leave my house right now before my husband comes home. And the hotline is very complex, and we can accommodate 110 plus languages. And this was a really great shelter there in Columbus, and we'd like to send you there right now. They have availability. We can take you there. We can get you there. And she said, well, you don't understand. My husband is a city official, and that's not going to be a safe place for me to be. So through our resources, we were able to relocate her 2 hours away and get her children into school, the school system, and her life just evolved, and she got remarried, and her life is great now.
The hotline has experienced an increase in domestic violence calls amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, but shelters have housed far less individuals due to the inability of leaving their homes.
Because they were able to make the calls when their husband stepped out or their wife stepped out. They're abusive women too, would step out, they could make the call, but they could not leave the house, and so the numbers were going down at the shelter, and we knew the calls were out there. So for example, I'll use Naples where I live. We work in tandem with the sheriff's department, so when those calls would come in to the local hotline there, we knew that there was a situation of abuse there, and so the sheriff's department would go and extract that family out safely and bring them to the shelter. So the calls were rising, but the trips, moving into the shelters were going down. So then we had to learn how to bridge that gap, and we did that through, well, personally speaking, in Naples where I live. And most shelters and police departments do work together, and the hotline as well. And so most cities fell into that format that law enforcement would have to go and help.
Aside from the domestic violence hotline, Mary Susan and her husband were one of the founding couples of the Naples Children and Education Foundation. She currently serves with the Naples Shelter for Abused Women and Children, also supporting initiatives for human trafficking victims. Mary Susan was the Ole Miss Women's Council for Philanthropy chair from 2018 to 2020. Her philanthropic endeavors have been at the forefront of her life.
Philanthropy is different than charity. Charity is just putting a Band-Aid on something. That planted a seed for me, and not only did that plant a seed, it created a root for, like, anytime I see an opportunity to help someone, whether it's, mentoring that situation that evening, you just want to do it. It's just, you want to give from the heart.
So what advice do you have for philanthropies to become self-sustainable?
Well, first of all, you have to differentiate yourself, and you have to be passionate about the philanthropy, and you have to get people on board in the community and or the nation or even globally about what your philanthropy is. And you have to hire the right people, and then you have to have the right donors, and you have to have development to bring not only personal dollars into your philanthropy, but corporations' dollars into your philanthropy. You have to have grant writers to write grants, because there's money out there on an international basis for most philanthropies that you would have. And you have to completely differentiate yourself, because everyone's going after the same dollars, and you have to put your mission statement out, why your philanthropy is so important and how it's going to benefit people's lives and better people's lives, whether it's for domestic violence, a new vaccine, whatever your philanthropy is, children at risk. You really want to differentiate yourself and have the right staff in place the right donors in place, and people who are continually networking for your philanthropy. And you do not churn your donors. You're continually finding new people and new corporations to get involved, and then their networks reach out to other networks that they have, mutual networks, and that's how you sustain a philanthropy. And you really want your philanthropy to have a high grade. You really want to have a low administrative fees for your philanthropy, so people know that their dollars are going directly to the cause itself.
It was in elementary school that Miss Mary Susan first learned the importance of philanthropy.
When I was probably about 8 years old, my mother had us go, it was around Christmas, to the toy store, and it was below the Ben Franklin store in my hometown. And you know, because you're from the next hometown over, and that's where you would buy your toys. And it was a seasonal kind of thing when the toys would be there. And she had us buy specific toys. What do you think a little boy, 7 years old, would like? What do you think a little girl would like? And so we bought these toys. We did not know why we were buying these toys, my two younger sisters and I. So we went home and we wrapped them up, and this was on a Thursday night or something, a Thursday afternoon. And then Sunday night, it was cold and it was raining, and normally at that time we would be getting ready for bed, and my parents said, girls, we're getting in the car and we're going to take a ride. And my mother was loading up groceries and she was loading up those presents, and we drove to this neighborhood that I had never been to before. And there was this house, and it did not have electricity. It was a dirt road, and my dad got out of the car. He knocked on the door, and his father came to the door, and then Dad motioned for us to come into the house. And these children were laying on the floor on blankets, and they really didn't have much food to eat. The refrigerator was empty. The cabinets were empty with food, and it was freezing cold. And so not only did we take in all the groceries, we took in the toys and we gave them to the children. And we realized that they did not have electricity. My dad called someone that night and was able to get to small towns so you can get the electricity cut on that night. And that really planted the seed that my parents saw someone that needed something, and they reached out and made it happen. And what's really interesting is my mother passed away 5 years ago, and so she's buried in this cemetery, and it overlooks her headstone. It's a beautiful old cemetery in Savannah, Tennessee, and her headstone overlooks the street where that house is, where that family lived at that time. Now that house is no longer there and it's been developed, but it overlooks that. And my sisters and I and my dad talk about that all the time, how, ironic that would be where she's buried.
As college students, Mary Susan continues to encourage myself and the rest of the Ole Miss Women's Council scholars to serve and do whatever we can to help.
If you see of a situation that needs, something's just not right, or there's a way, and it doesn't require money. It can be a mindful thing, of mentoring, of someone that you see is struggling, and whether it be that they can't buy groceries, or they need tutoring, or they need self-esteem, that they're struggling, you can just reach out and help them. If you identify that situation, and then you just reach out. But you have to reach out, because more than likely, if you're going to have that philanthropic mindset, you're going to be the one that reaches out to that person. You have to see it through from beginning to end. Or in my situation, I don't ever want it to end. It ends the day that I die, but not even that, because I think I plant seeds along the way that other people will continue to carry on, what I have been doing. And I really try to mentor and think about how I could be a better person, and how those people around me, I could be an influence to them, and they be a good influence to me as well. So Ian, I have a question for you. You and I grew up 20 miles apart on the banks of the Tennessee River. You grew up in Clifton, I grew up in Savannah, Tennessee, and they both were rural towns, but very good towns. I mean, I love Savannah and you love Clifton, and that's home. When people ask me where is home, Savannah, Tennessee. So coming from a small town like Clifton and from Savannah, Tennessee, what motivated you to get so involved with all the philanthropic causes that you have on campus?
I've never met people that are greater or more kind than the people that live in Clifton or Savannah, but they also don't have the opportunities that I've had and that you've had and that people here have had. So I think it's I grew up there were people that needed help around me. So from an early age, like you said, that's kind of just what you did. You helped people. And I think coming here and like seeing all the opportunities that I've had, having my school paid for by the Women's Council, I just feel this like super like intense need to just kind of give back because and kind of pay it forward, because I know that I don't want to squander the opportunities that I've been given, because so many people, some of my best friends in high school haven't had those opportunities. Some of my best friends in high school, grew up in trailers where their power got cut off, or some of my best friends in high school were on, had to have free meals from the state. So it's just kind of having a background where you see these people who are incredible and who could do so much, but they just haven't been given those opportunities. That kind of pushes me to make sure that, if you can help one person have the opportunity to go and be successful, then that's what you should do.
My name is Ian Pigg, and I'm a junior Ole Miss Women's Council scholar. Miss Mary Susan has inspired me in her constant dedication to her philanthropic passions and in her mentorship, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Miss Mary Susan Gallien Clinton. Visit thehotline.org to learn more about the National Domestic Violence Hotline and how you can help.